Hello everyone, and welcome to Minimalist Gourmet, where today I'll be teaching you how to make pork carnitas. This slow-cooked pulled pork dish is then fried in its own fat for a juicy yet crunchy exterior. This is an episode you don't want to miss. Let's get started. Let's take a look at the meat we'll be using. I have about 4.5 pounds of pork shoulder here. You want to use something that has a lot of connective tissue and a decent amount of fat. Avoid the lean, more expensive cuts of pork in this dish. They really don't work as well, and try to get something that's boneless. You're going to cut your pork into pieces about this big. It's not technical, it doesn't have to be an exact size. You just want something that has a good amount of surface area and is going to be easy to handle later in the pot. To cook this, you want to use the largest pot that you have that has a lid. Load up all of your cut pork pieces in, and we're going to start seasoning it. We'll begin with 1.5 tablespoons of salt, 1 heaping teaspoon of ground black pepper, 2 teaspoons of ground cumin, and 2 teaspoons of paprika. You can use smoked if you like, but you don't have to. Now, we're going to massage all of these spices and seasonings into the meat very well. Don't be afraid, get in there and feel the meal. You want to massage everything into the surface until it's completely and equally covered. More aromatics go in, starting with 2 sticks of cinnamon, 3 bay leaves, a nice heaping tablespoon of dried oregano, about 7 or 8 cloves of garlic. You can certainly add more if you like. 1 medium white onion that I've just quartered up. I'm going to break it up just a little bit and toss it in. The juice of 2 whole limes goes in. You can squeeze them directly in. Don't worry if a seed or two falls in, that's not a problem. 2 whole oranges. I know they're green, but these are oranges. You want to just go ahead and squeeze them. Once again, directly into the pot's not a problem. And we're going to actually put the rind of 1 whole orange into the pot. For just a touch of sweetness and some extra flavor, I'm going to put in about a cup of Coca-Cola. Finally, I'm going to top this off with enough cool drinking water to cover everything by about 1/2 inch. Also, if you have it, I recommend adding a cup of lard to the dish right now. I'll explain a little bit why later. Unfortunately, no store in my city had it, so I couldn't put it into my dish today. Start cooking this over medium-high to high heat until everything comes up to a nice heavy simmer like this. At this point, I like to give it a good, thorough mix to make sure that all the ingredients are well mixed before cooking. Now, my pot is a little small, so I left out a little water until I could mix everything, but here I'm going to go ahead and add just enough to cover everything by about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Once you have this up to a nice simmer, you're going to drop the temp down to low, cover it with a lid, or in my case, a sheet pan, and you're going to cook it on a very low temperature where it's just barely simmering for about 4 hours. That's right, 4 whole hours. Check on it every hour or so while cooking, and if the water level drops too much to expose the meat while cooking, just go ahead and top it off a little bit. 4 hours later, you should be left with something that looks like this. After 4 hours of cooking, you can see the meat has reduced by quite a bit and all that fat is rendered out. This is looking great. We're going to go ahead and test it here for tenderness, and it's pulling apart very easily, so this is looking great. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little taste here to make sure that seasoning's spot on, and I think we're good to go. Go ahead and turn off your heat and start pulling out all of your pieces of pork. You want to put your pork on a tray and let it sit at room temperature for about 30 or 45 minutes. During this time, the temperature is going to drop and allow all of the internal juices to redistribute. That way, when you start shredding them here in a little bit, all the juices don't run out of the tray and they stay inside the meat exactly where you want them. We're not done with this braising liquid, however. We need to keep it for 2 separate reasons later on in the cooking process. I have a large bowl. I'm going to go ahead and pour all of my braising liquid through a sieve here and filter out all of the solid pieces. Go ahead and throw away the solid pieces. You don't need those anymore, but save the braising liquid for a little bit later on in the recipe. It's been about 1/2 hour here, and my pork is completely down to room temperature, and it's time to shred. You can do this by hand if you want, but I'm just going to go ahead and do it with 2 forks. I like to scrape off any large chunks of fat like this and set those aside. I don't really like to eat those in my carnitas, but they're definitely culinary gold, so you can save them for another dish. Just go ahead and take your 2 forks here, and it's very easy to shred it into nice bite-sized pieces. Work your way through until you've completely shredded all of the pork. Our braising liquid has come down to room temperature, and a nice layer of fat is formed along the top. That's exactly what we want to see. If you added lard during the cooking process, you should have an even thicker layer of fat along the top. We're going to carefully skim this fat off using a spoon and put it into a frying pan because we're going to use its own fat to fry the shredded pork in. Don't worry, if your meat wasn't very fatty or you don't have enough fat at this point to fry it, you can always substitute in a little bit of extra lard or a little bit of vegetable oil will work as well. But trust me, if you can use pork fat, it's going to be even better. Heat your rendered pork fat on a very high heat for a couple of minutes until it's very, very hot. We're going to fry our shredded pork in the pork fat, and we don't want it to be in direct heat for a very long time. Since we cooked it or braised this low and slow, the pork is nice and moist, and we want to retain that moisture while adding a little bit of crispy exterior. With your pork fat nice and hot, we're going to add in our shredded pork. You can add as much as you like, but I recommend that you keep it in an even, thin layer so everything cooks quickly and evenly. You may have to do 2 or 3 batches of cooking, that's not a problem. You don't want to mess with or move the pork very much during this cooking process. You want to just make sure that everything is pressed down and in good contact with the surface of the pan so that it can fry up evenly. It should take about a minute or two on this first surface before it's nice and crispy. Simply use your spatula to pull up the corner and check on how it's cooking. Once you see it's reached a nice golden brown exterior that's quite crunchy, go ahead and give everything a flip, mix it well, press it back down into a single layer, and allow it to cook on the second side, just as before, until that has reached a golden brown and delicious texture. The entire process of frying should last about 4 to 5 minutes and leave you with something that looks like this. Nice and crunchy on the outside, juicy and tender in the middle. Finally, we're going to finish off our carnitas with a little bit of our braising liquid. Go ahead and give it a stir and get a little bit of the braising liquid from underneath. Spoon that over the top of the fried carnitas. This will add not only flavor, but a little bit of extra moisture right at the end. Go ahead and turn off the heat, give everything a nice stir, and your carnitas are ready to enjoy. I'll be enjoying my carnitas with a little bit of cilantro lime rice. Make sure to subscribe so you can see this recipe for my cilantro lime rice next week. Or enjoy this in a taco, burrito, nachos, over some eggs, in a sandwich, on a baked potato, or 1,001 different options. And guys, it really is just that easy to make this delicious Mexican dish at home in your kitchen tonight. I want to thank each and every one of you for watching today. I really do appreciate your time and attention. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I know I enjoyed making it, and I hope to see each and every one of you here again next week on the next episode of Minimalist Gourmet.